Welcome to the Zero Trust Journey podcast, created by cybersecurity practitioners for those walking the same path. We share real stories, hard lessons, and hard-won victories from the field, so you can sidestep the pitfalls and deliver the wins. Grab your coffee, tune out the buzzwords, and let's get into the real story right here on the Zero Trust Journey podcast.
Welcome back to the Zero Trust Journey episodes, the podcast where we talk about the journey of cybersecurity and zero trust. I'm your host, Victor Monga. With me today, it's been a while, are my co-pilots on the path of zero trust journey, Zach Pugh and Steve Turner. Guys, good to have you both back.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Victor.
So today we're going to be tackling a question that we get asked a lot. So we are about 50 episodes in the Zero Trust Journey podcast. A lot of people are listening to it, including SMB CEOs, co-founders who are trying to understand cybersecurity. And there's a question that's central to the entire economy. Is zero trust a luxury for global corporations or a necessity for small and medium-sized businesses, the SMBs, if you will? That traditional castle and moat perimeter is dead because a lot of the SMBs are using off-the-shelf SaaS applications, and they don't have a whole lot of on-prem servers. So they never built the mentality of having firewalls, never built the mentality of having that policies that keeps you. I used to have that trusted zone and untrusted zone. Nobody uses that terms anymore, by the way. Yet many SMBs still see advanced security as too costly or complex. We are here to challenge that and give them a clear practical roadmap, especially anchoring their strategy around zero trust. So my first question to both of you, Zach, we can start with you and you could pass the baton to Steve. Is zero trust relevant to SMBs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when we think about zero trust, I don't think about it in terms of who it's relevant for. I think about it as the extent of the controls that the business can afford to implement. And that's a consistent theme that we have across all security practitioners. It's what are the controls that you're putting in place to protect the value of the data that you're protecting? So it's not a matter of should you do zero trust. It's what are the right controls for you to put in place? And
we'll ask the same question. Steve, what's your opinions on this one?
Yeah, I think I want to echo kind of what Zach's talking about. It's interesting because in a previous role, I worked for an MSP that served a lot of SMBs and local state government like agencies and stuff like that. And I don't know if you'd be pleasantly surprised or horrified, but the level of security and level of infrastructure and investment there is pretty similar along those lines, between the two places. So I think zero trust is hyper relevant for SMBs. I don't think that they have the luxury of crafting custom threat intelligence or feeding the beasts. I kind of call it when it comes to enabling all the complexities of zero trust. But I think that it is highly relevant, nowadays. I think with the advancement of a lot of technology out there, I think it's a lot easier to consume than it used to be originally when zero trust was kind of coined, by John Kindervag and team.
Yeah, and that's how I feel it as well, right? I mean, when SMBs and let's call them mid-sized enterprises, they're asking that, hey, zero trust is too complex for me, or zero trust is not relevant for me because I still need to understand what cybersecurity means for me, for my business. And that's where I tend to actually have some data, some analytics around cost. IBM report the global average at $4.45 million for a decent amount of when it comes to data breach, right? Not at enterprise level, mid to large enterprise, that's where the cost is. Can SMB absorb that? Can SMB afford $5 million if something happens like data breach? They do have customer data. They are usually a critical piece of a bigger wheel. So if you are actually helping DoD, if you are e-commerce, if you are the supply chain actual organization who's helping out a bigger organization, then maybe you can't survive that data breach, right? So the reality check is, can SMBs wait, or why SMBs can't wait? Let's put it that way. Zach, let's start with the hard numbers that define the high stakes for small businesses, which I just said, $5 million. They often feel that they're too small to be a target. Is that true? Should SMBs not be worried because cybercriminals are always going to be targeting the large numbers or banks where the real money is. Like, are SMBs immune to attacks?
No, not at all. I think that's a fallacy. The risk here is existential. Research has consistently shown that smaller organizations are frequent targets and far more vulnerable to business disruption than their larger counterparts. And that's why we think about zero trust and never trust, always verify ideas. It's not optional. It limits your blast radius. When your identity, device, and your context are verified every time, a single phished account doesn't become a free pass to the rest of your network. And there's a dollars and cents angle here too, like you established. The global average cost of a breach is in the millions, and that's not a hit that any SMBs that I know can simply just absorb. In zero trust here, it doesn't just eliminate those attack vectors, it's shrinking that damage in your downtime. I like to think about it like child-proof caps for your data, right? Sometimes there's a little bit of an annoying twist there, but it saves you from the pain that you can't really afford to deal with.
Spoken like a true father. And Steve, for you, again, some stats for you as well. When I was researching for this episode, where successful cyber attack is often fatal for smaller organizations. And some of the reports indicate that up to 60% of the small businesses, they actually close down within 6 months of a successful attack. So when we say that SMBs are, or at least what the attackers are not coming their way, what do you say why zero trust should be an anchor strategy for SMBs as well? And it's not about the technical aspects of it, what they need to put or install. How zero trust must be an anchor strategy for SMBs, and would it help them to survive those sort of attacks?
Yeah, I mean, so to echo what Zach said, and as a father, I don't have quite the analogy that Zach threw out there. So I love the analogy. Things that I've seen kind of around this, and I love the stat that you threw out there, Victor, is, even from the Verizon DBIR report, they said that small, medium-sized businesses were 4 times more likely to get attacked than the larger institutions. And that the research that they did, pretty much all of the data that was compromised, was the bread and butter of like what these mom and pop operations relied on to do their business. Like we could talk, mega scale, like, the Jaguar Land Rover, ransomware attack, where it affected downstream all of those small and medium businesses. So it wasn't even necessarily them that were being targeted. But then we talk kind of going upstream. One of these incidents, can take out one of these businesses supplying, somebody, like a Jaguar Land Rover or a larger institution. And if they don't deliver on time, they're out of business. And they don't have a staff of 1 million security engineers or threat responders or SOC or anything like that. So I think zero trust, and there's a lot of basic things, or I like to call them commodity things, that are enabled in the solutions that they use every day, that they can adopt the zero trust mentality.
Sure.
And
I want to double click on
makes the big.
I want to double click on your comment about like SMBs don't have large security teams, which is obvious, right? So let's talk about practical side of it. An SMB doesn't have dedicated security team. They don't even have IT team, let alone security team. So when they hear zero trust, they're trying to understand where this fits into cybersecurity. They're looking for that blinky box which has zero trust on it, and they can plug it in. They're thinking that this zero trust is something that they have to actually bring it to the organization physically, and they plug it in, and now their organization is secure. A lot of sci-fi movies give them illusion, so nothing wrong with it. I mean, and again, this is where we need to help them. We can help them, where we need to simplify it. What are the absolute high impact first steps that an SMB can take if they are anchoring their security strategy as zero trust? If they think zero trust will help them prove that they're doing due diligence, they actually have a decent amount of maturity and growing and evolving for that matter, what are the first steps, high impact, that can be like, okay, this is what you do immediately if you're anchoring your security strategy as zero trust?
I mean, the biggest thing that I'm just going to like probably echo until I'm on my deathbed is like, they should enable multi-factor authentication or MFA. The solutions that they're probably utilizing today, whether they're using Google Apps, or they're using Microsoft's collaboration ecosystem, or they're even using Slack or something, maybe they're just using Gmail, which a lot of these businesses don't have, businessy solutions that they use to support themselves. All of the solutions that they're utilizing today, they can enable MFA. They can enable things like passkeys,
Funny you
where
mentioned MFA as your first thing. I have some stats from a report, I think it's from Okta, that 93% of the SMBs are actually enforcing MFA on most of their access. I don't know the subject or target group for that is, but there is some stat that this is becoming a little bit more norm where let's enable MFA if it's a mission critical application.
that's fantastic. Yeah, I'd also like to know, who is the subject of the stats that they're collecting there. I think the biggest thing here is that if they don't have MFA enabled, they should just, consider the fact that they will be breached. It's just a matter of time. There was an article that I had read yesterday about a furniture supply business. They specifically made flooring, who got in an order for around $200,000 worth of flooring. Again, this was a mega order for them. And somebody had compromised the system that they used to generate the invoices and the payments. And so they changed the routing numbers and the account numbers for where the payment was being issued to. And the business thought that they were paid appropriately because they saw that the invoice was marked as paid. And they shipped all the goods already to the location that the attacker had provided. And they weren't able to recover any of those
We're in
materials.
a wrong line of business, I think. I mean, on this side, we're not making enough money. I mean, we know all of these tactics, and yet we're not employing them. So,
I mean, Zach, what's top of mind for you? Like, if you were to
yeah,
give,
high impact first steps that some SMB is considering as zero trust their anchor strategy.
Yeah, I completely agree with Steve. When I'm thinking about a project by project glide path type thing, project one would be, enforcing specifically for me, focusing on the government sector a lot is phishing resistant MFA, so that you're avoiding a lot of the pitfalls of the phishing enabled. I don't know what else we call it. We have the term for phishing resistant, but the other side, what phishing enabled? I don't know. But that is the first step, and SSO
Sure.
is also a good one for email, finance, CRM, any admin portals. When I think about project two, I'm thinking about things like standing admin rights, requiring device health checks for sensitive apps
So
and
around
admin
IA,
tasks. Yeah, exactly. And then like project three, I'm thinking like sharing defaults, not having the anyone with a link, which is detrimental for docs, and those kind of simple
sure.
DLP guardrails. Those are the
Yeah.
kind of actionable steps that I would start taking as a small business to start reducing my risk down.
That is so interesting. When I think about first steps, when it comes to zero trust, I'm from network engineering. So I'm always thinking about microsegmentation. I'm always thinking about creating separate zones, VLANs, subnets, and just like breaking it down. But it's interesting because I think both of you gravitated towards a lot about IAM, a lot about like how people are logging in, a lot about how to actually mitigate the first line of defense, which is people interacting with the internet and how the access can be compromised for attacker to get in, which is more relevant, I think, because a lot of these SMBs don't have a large network. So it cannot be like dissected to a level where the way I'm thinking, like, okay, you have 200 machines here, you have servers here, you have database servers here, you have web servers here. Like 70% of these SMBs don't even have any server on site. They only have Wi-Fi and a cable network. That's about it. I think your advice is a lot more relevant than what I was thinking about microsegmentation, because as long as they're treating their devices as I don't care if I am on site at my work, I'm not trusting anything. I'm still going to the same checks. I'm going to the same controls, so that doesn't matter coffee shop, airport, library, or my work, my device and my access is treated as equally.
I do think you have a point there, Victor, though,
Thank
because,
you.
like the other thing that I want to call out, we should have probably had shot glasses for this, because neither me or Zach said that identity is the new perimeter. So we didn't check out that off on our bingo boards right away. But I think that something's that has become commodity, to your point around networking. is that SMBs can implement enterprise networking type controls in their environments without the enterprise networking budget these days, which I think a lot of people don't know. I am starting to see in more coffee shops some ubiquity equipment, being stood up or, things like that, where I think there is a recognition that they can separate their backend systems, from the public Wi-Fi that folks are utilizing.
I'll share something cool here. One of the places that I've read that in Middle East, they're actually putting a firewall per traffic light pole. So not a firewall for the whole region or block, one firewall per traffic light, so it cannot be compromised. Attacker can't just change the lights, it's that critical for them. I don't know the depth and breadth of it, but when I read it, it made me think that it's not as simple anymore. You can't say that just because I have 30 computers, just because I have 50 computers, or just because I have 50 laptops on site, I don't need to segment. I don't need to worry about monitoring where the lateral movement is going. You do, because that's what the firewalls will do. Even though if you have not prevented it, it'll give you the detection. It'll give you the forensics that when and who started the attack, and then laterally how they moved. Recently, I went to a conference, and from Zero Trust Journey podcast, I printed something because a lot of people were asking me, what about this, that, and the other? And usual answer is, Ryan, it varies. It depends on how you're doing it, what you're doing it. It really depends. So let's switch gears. Actually, for SMBs, I would say not majority, but decent amount also have to comply by specific standards. It could be as simple as their customer, their client want them to have these controls, or they have to go through some NIST framework or CMMC or specific something like that. So how does Zero Trust can help them? And this is a common question I get. How can Zero Trust help them achieve those compliances? Or can it be an influencing factor when they are preparing for the compliance? Zach, I know this is your favorite topic, so I'm going to start with you, and then we'll bring it to Steve.
I think I'm going to need to borrow that sign of yours. It depends.
I will send it to you.
Is a great answer for this. It depends largely on the framework. It depends on the existing posture of the organization. I probably want to keep CMMC out of this because I know that's a bit of a spider web to navigate.
Sure.
But when we think about Zero Trust, we're thinking about core security controls that are bettering the posture of an organization, which I think that is always better than compliance. I'm a compliance guy, but compliance for compliance sake is useless. When we're thinking about compliance, we're really thinking about complying with a higher standard of security. So I think any organization will benefit from implementing Zero Trust security controls in pursuit of compliance standards simply because they're better security posture. So yes, taking steps on your Zero Trust path to better your security will enable you to be more successful in compliance. It will enable you to reach higher levels of compliance, whether that be CMMC or some of these other standards, simply because you're going to be better off security-wise.
Right. And we had a speaker actually on one of these episodes who said that I think the compliance is the table stakes and not the ceiling, something like that.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think that was Chase.
That's right. Yeah. Dr. Zero Trust, absolutely. Steve, how about you? I'm sure when you're talking to your customers, mostly they are enterprise, but when you hear them talk about can Zero Trust accelerate my journey to compliance, what are your usual responses, or how do you actually talk them out of it that Zero Trust is not actually helping you, but completing these tactical security postures and hygiene and going through the whole strategy will help you accomplish those specific controls that will be required in a compliance. So you start with compliance, but Zero Trust is kind of the strategy. Compliance is just a verification of your controls.
I love whenever this conversation comes up, and Chase has some more colorful quotes around compliance. When I have this conversation with even the organization that I'm at now, it's like, when we talk about it, they're like, oh, we want to do the CIS top 18. We want to meet, some of the NIST cybersecurity standards, and pick and choose which flavor, they want to meet. And then I kind of go from there and, they say, well, what about the zero trust thing? Like, what is it going to get us? It's like, what if I told you could implement a framework that exceeded all of those standards? No matter what standard you brought in, you could exceed it by implementing this type of strategy. Hey, the typical response is, you've got to be BSing me around this.
Sure.
Like, that's not true. But, if you pull up all the documentation that CISA, and a bunch of the other folks out there have helpfully put together, you can tell that if they pursue, a zero trust strategy and pick your domain, identity, network,
Right.
devices, data, if they follow kind of or map their strategy to that, all of these top controls that they're going after will easily be met. Some of the other things that are my favorite around this are either the governments that go and take, a lot of this and they boil it down. One of my favorite ones is the Australian Cybersecurity Center, or the ACSC, their Essential 8. I love that they put that together, because you want to sum up like the things that should be top of mind before you kind of build out the rest of your strategy.
Sure.
I think that's a great starting place. So typically I go in with a lot of those conversations and say that zero trust helps you exceed any of the compliance or regulatory standards that you're trying to meet.
That's a bold claim, though. I like it.
I think if you really dig into it, it's the truth. We could probably pick a standard here on the show. Like, we talk about CIS Control 1, inventorying your enterprise assets. What does zero trust tell you to do around that?
Yeah, that's the first thing. Like, know your assets, software, hardware, machine identities, everything. Yeah.
Yeah. What does John say? He's like, understand your protect surface, map your protect surface. It's like, boom, right there. It's like you've exceeded already CIS Control 1 and 2 without even going and seeking that out purposely.
For sure.
I don't think it's as complex as most people think it is.
I think industry had made it complex, right? And because there's a tsunami of products labeled as zero trust. So when you see zero trust, when you Google zero trust, if you're not in the space, in the industry, you're thinking that I need to buy the biggest box with blinky lights, which has labeled zero trust, and that is zero trust. But as you are dividing it down to bite size, where, well, if you want zero trust, and then you start anchoring that strategy, you start mapping out your protect surface. Well, now you got to know your assets. That's just there. If you bring it to compliance and compliance says, well, do you know your assets? Well, yeah, the list is already ready because you mapped your protect surface. Yeah, I again, it's a conversation in these circles that makes a lot of sense. But when you are non-IT, non-security, it can be overwhelming.
Just for validation, I typed in zero trust into Google, and vendors were the first 3 results that came up. So I think we could probably do a little bit better there.
Yeah, even the definition as well, right? A lot of definitions are coming from vendors, what they think zero trust should be, that will be tailored to their services or their products. So again, can compete with the multi-millions, or we will continue fighting the fight through zero trust journey. All right. With that, I really want to thank you both. It's been a minute that all 3 of us gathered on this podcast. We've been doing different episodes separately as a host, but having just 3 of us bantering and talking about this for the sake of SMB market, I think it's helpful, and your insights are valuable. So thank you both for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for tuning into Zero Trust Journey. We'll catch you next time as we continue to verify everything. So if you want to catch our latest episode, go to ztjourney.com or find us on LinkedIn. That's where we post all the upcoming events, past events, information, and you get to connect with all the host and episode guests and network with them. Until next time, thank you very much.
That's a wrap on the Zero Trust Journey. Now it's your turn. Step into the spotlight, share your story, and be part of the journey. Subscribe to Zero Trust Journey on LinkedIn for the latest news, events, and giveaways. Until next time.